I'm currently at Google. I work in their, I work as a product manager. And my current role is within the YouTube ads business. So chances are, if you have opened up YouTube and you've seen an ad, it's some of the work that I've done is actually responsible for getting the ad in front of you at the time that you saw it. And then with all of the payouts that go behind that to the creator ecosystem that ends up actually powering YouTube. And I was chatting with Yasin before this to see, I know that he mentioned most of the folks here are actually very interested in going more so down like the SWE path. Myself, I have not done the SWE role. I actually ended up in product management more so through the analyst role. I started my career thinking that I would probably spend the rest of my life working on problems in the economic space. That's why I ended up at the Federal Reserve. Loved what I did there. I think in hindsight, if I were to try to connect my dots, I've always sought opportunities and places that are working on really hard problems. That's what led me to my first role. And then that is actually what led me out of research, surprisingly, and into the tech sector. So I spent a little bit of time in startups that were trying to do really hard things in hindsight. They were working in industries that were rapidly, where like the barrier to entry was sort of receding, and it was getting more and more competitive. And at the same time, there needed to be just really high technical talent to be able to succeed. And I learned a lot in those places, and then eventually landed at Google. For that, I'm so grateful, love what I do. All of my time at Google has actually been spent one way or another within the ads business. So in talking to Yasin, I figured I would talk from the perspective of someone that has been on the business side and someone that partners with SWEs all the time. Most of my time is actually spent working with SWEs and data scientists and folks who are more aligned with the commercial and go-to-market capabilities in Google's ads business. What would I, recommend to folks who are trying to build their career in SWE or just like in tech more generally? I think a couple of things. In hindsight, some of my most impactful work has actually come about organically. It's not work that was attached to OKRs. It wasn't work that was like very pre-planned necessarily. A lot of it actually just came out of a genuine curiosity of my part, a conversation that I had with one of the engineers or one of the analysts or scientists that I partner with. And it just kind of blossomed into something that ended up creating a lot of impact for the business because all of us were interested enough in solving the problem that we just stuck to it. Even if OKRs change, or even if our teams changed, or even if some other change happened, the internal drive just sort of kept us going. So I would say, as you get to know people on your teams, and like as you're getting to know companies and opportunities that you can take, get to know the people around you. And even if you're not on the PM path, I would highly recommend actually getting some sort of a PM mentor, because when you find a strong partner on the business side or on the product side, they can multiply your impact multiple fold, and they create leverage for you. They create leverage not just for your work, but they also create leverage for you in terms of who else you can get to know in the company and what you do after the one specific role that you are working on. Because jobs change, titles change, companies change, but it's really relationships and people that will end up defining your career. That's definitely been, the case for me. The other thing that I would recommend to folks that are interested in going down more like the SWE path and not necessarily like the business side of things is to just try your best to create impact when you have the opportunity, almost at like all costs. And for those of you that have already had your first SWE role, or that have had the chance to actually, start working in more of like a corporate setting, that advice may resonate with you, because you'll know that sometimes you just a lot of things happen, and you may be getting asked to do things where the impact of your work is not that clear. Do it. Do it for the sake of sort of like building your portfolio in the company and getting the right experiences under your belt. But what will really grow your skill set, what will really grow your network, what will really grow your long-term potential is doing work that actually grows the business. So when you have the opportunity, just make sure that you try to create impact at all costs. And if you don't know what will actually create impact, that's where I think finding some product manager or someone on the business side, who can fill in the context for you will make all the difference. So I will actually stop there. That's a little bit about me, what I do now and what I would suggest to folks who are more interested in going down the SWE path within tech companies. Actually, one more thing. And the one more thing is I've done a lot of interviews over the years. And one thing that I have noticed, especially for folks who are newer in their career and really want to break into tech or like get their start in tech, is that a lot of people have gotten really good at interviewing to the point where as an interviewer, it's not just that like my bar has also gotten higher, but I can kind of tell. Like I can tell when people have just prepped a lot. And I tend to find myself actually going off script whenever I can to get deeper insight into how originally, how much of an original thinker is this person really? How do I know that they're not just sort of responding from a script or saying the right things? If they were given a novel problem, which is what we encounter every single day, as folks who work in tech companies, do I think that they have the fluidity, like the dexterity to be able to go and just like tackle those problems? So just one thing to keep in mind is you absolutely should prepare. That's just, almost like table stakes. But don't forget that when you're having some of these conversations and interviews, especially if you're like later down the pipeline in the interview cycle, most people on the other side, as long as they're experienced, they are looking to see if you also have that, or something that speaks to the original thinking and the creativity, because that's what we desperately need, I think, and is always in demand.
Very cool. So I have some questions for you, Meryam, and I would like the chat to also be a little bit engaged and ask some questions. So the first question I want to actually just jump into is I think you had a asymptotic rise, specifically from from working from the Federal Reserve Bank into getting a master's at MIT. Like, what was that like, right? Like most people today, I actually tell them not to get a master's. I tell them to just pursue their career and just be really, really like revenue, focus on the revenue, like kind of like what you're saying. Uh, what was the decision process like? Like, did you already make up your mind while you're in college that you were going to get a master's eventually? And then just a follow up to that is, do you think you could have been where you are now without getting the master's?
I think that's a great question. And I think the advice that you're giving people is actually very practical. So my context at that time was, so I was born and raised in New York, is that there just was not a lot of tech, like software tech in New York at that time. The most that we had at that time was a little bit of biotech because of, I think, the proximity to Boston. Some inklings of of ad tech. AppNexus was sort of this like mid-sized, or is like a mid-sized company that's that was based in like Flatiron, and that was really about it. And so in my case and in my time, it just made so much sense to try to set myself up for a transition. But at the same time, and maybe like many of you, I actually had a lot of like familial obligations. Like a lot, it wasn't just about me sort of trying to maximize like my career prospects and like my personal development, but I had people who are like counting on me. And so for me, the risk and reward worked out such that if I was going to try to make like this big industry transition, I should do it in a way that I would still have tons of optionality where if things didn't work out, right? Like after I do this cross country move, after I switch into a domain where like, I mean, I knew no one, who was doing sort of, I knew no one like first degree that was working in tech, that was doing product. And I knew from the beginning I wanted to do product, that was doing engineering or like any of those any of those functions. And it just made sense for me personally and like in my life, given my responsibilities, to go down the master's route and like transition through an MBA. And that was kind of like an accepted path in the industry too. But I think now that's not so needed because there's just so much more awareness. I mean, I really like my experience. For me, I would keep things the same. But I think now there's just like so many communities online. There's so much more awareness. People have a willingness to connect and like help teach other people. That just was not there then. So for me, it was the right decision. It's also a very expensive decision. So I don't I don't think everyone needs to make that to be able to make the transition for themselves. But yeah, I think your advice is good. Like if you can actually get those reps in independently, if you can launch something, if you can build something independently, like that is going to teach you so much and also make you really valuable when and if you want to go work for someone else, right? Like when and if you want to go work for a company because they can actually see what you've done. And there's many ways to sort of like create those signals. Going to school is one of them. But if you can just build it on your own, like I value that actually a lot. And I think many people also value that. And that's a very practical way in like today's context in the industry.
I wanna
To create opportunities for yourself.
I actually want to just take this opportunity and just to connect some dots about one, you said a lot of people finesse interviews. And you try to go off script whenever you can. My dad does that too. I don't know if you know if he's in this call, but he's an engineering manager, and he knows when someone does like lead code, and like he'll ask like a two sum, then he'll turn it to three sum, then he'll ask four sum, and he'll just wait till like they like mess up. So and then he's like, all right, now the interview really begins, right? Muhammad Ali has tangent here. Muhammad Ali had said a thing like your real workout begins is when the pain starts, or like when it's like unknown territory, right? You start getting uncomfortable. So you talked about that, and then you talked about how people should be focusing on the revenue, right? Like be like to ask your product manager what makes the most money, what's getting the most, traction for the company, where's the momentum at, and how can you be a contributor in whatever capacity, whether you're a software engineer or whatever, intern, whatever. And then right now you just said like, signaling, right? And master. So I just want to share like a renewed like mission at Headstarter and like what we're trying to do. So there's three things that, in the next 5 years, if I'm able to do, I'll be really happy. The first is people here know like Neat Code. Neat Code is someone who explains like, algorithmic concepts very well. My goal is everyone who comes out of Headstarter can explain as good as Neat Code. So you can take algorithmic concepts and you can explain really well. Essentially make everyone to Neat Code. The second thing is I want to reinvent the way interviews are done, especially for software engineering, and it can be done similarly to product, because I used to think product was just like case study or product management specific, but there's actually 13 different types of questions a product asks, from strategy and like pricing and these other stuff, and we worked on that together when I was interviewing. My second thing is I think software engineering today, people can chat GPT and cheat on hacker ranks, and what Headstarter has created is a very unique experience for companies. Companies can use our tool to interview, but I think a much better assessment of interviewing a candidate is give them an AI instructor like Headstarter, tell them to build their own version of Devin. So essentially like a 2-day hackathon where you're seeing how well can they pair program with an AI, what type of questions do they ask, how good are they at literally chat GPTing, asking questions, follow-up questions, YouTubing, connecting dots, and bringing their past experience into one thing. So reinventing interviews for enterprises. And the last thing is being able to show signal over long periods of time. So I would like Headstarter to be a place where people use our product for like 2 years, and then they can signal that like, this is the data of how I speak. This is the data of how I ask questions. This is the data on how I work in teams. And of course, all the coding metrics along with it. In my opinion, that's a much better signal than, in my opinion, getting a master's from MIT undergrad as well from there. Because you've reinvented your own career, and you can do that anywhere you go. So just want to get your quick thoughts on that.
I've seen, Headstarter evolve over the years. I remember, the need in the market, like in the beginning at the time when you first started, and then, where you are now. I think there's a lot of truth to that for the sweet piece. You have the way I would think about it is, if you go through this experience, if you enroll in Headstarter and you actually follow through on the work, like there's no like you have not it's not only that you have nothing to lose, but there's no way that when you're in an interview, especially when you are past like those first couple of, like the first one or two sort of introductory interviews, that someone with experience on the other side who's actually looking for someone to create value for the company, right? Like not someone who's just there to sort of like collect something for like their resume, that they will not appreciate that. Like that is like the number one thing that I look for when I speak to people in the context of interviews is, are they actually excited about the work? And if you can prove that in some way, you should, absolutely do that, especially in today's market. So big plus one. And I'm excited to see actually how many of the folks here follow through on that, because I think there's just no way it can hurt you. I think it can only help. And it gives you more credibility.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Hey guys, people got questions. I'm trying to find a question here to ask Miriam. So I'm sure people have questions. Please drop your question again. I'm gonna select just one quick question and I want to ask her. So um Daniel has asked us twice if you have any hackathon experience. She didn't do CS undergrad. Well, did you go to any hackathons? I'm curious.
I have. I mean, I don't have a CS undergrad. I have a econ and public policy, but actually in all of the companies that I've worked in, well, okay, so pre-Google, everywhere I worked, we did hackathons, and actually two of the products that I built with my team actually ended up getting converted and were used in production services. So I think those are like, if you do them, outside of work, that same energy can be experienced in work. And if you end up joining a company where they don't have a practice of hackathons, bring them, because I mean, in the Valley, I think it's just a part of the culture where people appreciate hackathons. So it happens at work. And yeah, they're great. They're great for actually even killing ideas, because that way you don't test them out outside of hackathons. You test them out during these periods.
Very, very cool. Miriam, we're a little bit above time. I see one other question, which is, like one of the questions that someone had before. Where can people follow you? Like you don't have LinkedIn anymore. Do you have like a Medium or maybe another Head Start event in the future?
I don't have a LinkedIn right now, but I am on Twitter. You can follow me at
Oh,
MERBUKH. And I'm trying to get more active on there. I was pretty active a couple of years ago, and then I started sort of fell off, and I'm back now. But yeah, you can reach me there, and I'm fairly responsive.
I actually have just one last question. This kind of like made me ask a burning question. Because it gave me I relived an experience while I was in Capital One. So, I'm a person who asks a lot of questions, and sometimes I ask very tough questions that product managers hate answering. And so one of the questions I would ask my team, and I worked on the chatbot team at Capital One during COVID. We had over 1 billion monthly impressions. I would ask them, how much money are we actually saving? Now, Capital One spends 260 million on call centers in the Philippines, like 24/7, answering all the phone calls. So I figured that the goal of the chatbot was so that we don't call those guys and we save some money of that 260 million. Like AI is kind of doing it. And this is before ChatGPT and everything. So we had to build everything in house. I was so proud of like, yo, I'm on the team working on these cool things. And I figured that the KPI to measure what percentage of calls are deflected was actually never like publicized. And I had to like pry it out of the directors and product to get it. Sometimes organizations don't want software engineers to ask product questions or go into the KPIs and OKRs. They want them to just like code or like design their systems. I know Google's very different. They might be different. So what do you suggest? Like, how do you think software engineers can be more revenue focused and build a good relationship while also improving the company, which might come at the expense of some office politics that leadership has?
I think that's a very good question. So, at least the teams that I've been on, and the one that I'm currently on now, yes, it is very different, and I think part of that actually comes down to the fact that I personally just for me, I create more leverage for myself by working with people who ask questions like the ones that you are asking. So I very much try to set a tone and a culture of everyone should ask questions, because the reality is that no one person alone will get everything done. So actually, people who ask questions and who find opportunities create impact for everyone else, and then that's how the team wins. But that point aside, that wasn't your question. So to answer yours, I would say one-on-ones, right? So like where it's just like one person to one person, that's a very different tone usually, and almost everyone is a lot more receptive to questions that can sound more difficult, or that they actually don't have like the sometimes people don't even have like the ability to answer it, right? It's not just about like their willingness. But I think try one-on-ones, and I think secondly, always make sure, this is a Google saying, that you outperform your core. So you have a core set of like job responsibilities, and if you're a SWE, then yes, like that involves actually creating, maintaining good code. Do that, and then you add things that are outside of your core. I think you can start adding things outside of your core in smaller spaces like one-on-ones, but once you have established that you can do your core, then expanding beyond that, it should be very healthy for you to do that. And you can start a bit more with like a smaller bet by doing it in one-on-ones, and then bringing it up in like team meetings. But I think it's a good instinct to have.